Los Angeles County has more than 21,000 homicide cases on file. Roughly 4,500 of them were never solved. Out of all of them, decades of them, exactly one was ever cracked using genetic genealogy. This is that one. And you'll understand why it's still, all these years later, the only one. January 19th, 1996, Covina, California. A retirement home called Covina Villa. The kind of place with a communal dining room and a nurse on shift, and a sliding glass door on the ground floor that residents liked because it let the morning light in. Mary Frances Iaconis Lindgren lived alone in a first-floor room there. 67 years old. A mother, a grandmother, the kind of woman whose day had a rhythm to it. Breakfast, a phone call, maybe a crossword. Staff found her body around 7:30 that morning. She had been beaten, raped, strangled. Someone had come through that sliding glass door in the night, the same door that let in the morning light. And by the time anyone found her, whoever it was, had been gone for hours. Keep that door in mind. It matters more than it should later. Homicide investigators from the sheriff's department responded alongside Covina police. Crime lab scientists processed the room. Detectives interviewed everyone connected to the retirement home. Staff, residents, family members, contractors, delivery drivers, neighbors. Weeks became months. Nothing. They had the one thing detectives dream about, a DNA profile from the killer himself. But in 1996, it was almost useless. The databases came back empty. So the file went into storage, the way most cold cases do, except one detective refused to let it stay there. His name was Joe Purcell. He caught the case in 1996. He retired from the department in 2009 and came back anyway. Rehired part-time to keep working the murders nobody else had time for. Mary Lindgren's file sat on his desk that whole time. Not because anyone ordered him to keep it there. It never went away, he'd say later. I've had this case on my desk since 1996. At a certain point, he wasn't even getting paid for the hours he put into it. For 23 years, that's what this case was. A room with a sliding door, a DNA sample with nowhere to go, and one detective who wouldn't close the folder. Investigators resubmitted the DNA to the California Department of Justice in 2019. Not for a straightforward match this time, but for a familial search. A harder question. Does this DNA share enough with someone already in the system to be related to our suspect? If you've followed how the Golden State Killer got caught, you already know the shape of this. Same idea, different database. In July of 2020, the lab called back a partial match. Not to the killer himself, to his father. A man named Adolfo Bernal had a prior conviction on record, which meant his DNA had entered the state database years earlier, filed under his own case, with no idea it would ever be used to catch someone else's. His son was 46 years old. His name was David Adolf Bernal. He'd been 22, living in El Monte at the time of the murder. On August 6, 2020, deputies served a warrant at his home and arrested him. But the arrest didn't end the story. Not yet. Mary Lindgren's son, Don, got the call while he was standing at his mother's grave, laying down sunflowers. As he held them, a dragonfly landed on the flowers.
To me, that was a sign, he said. Mom knew. You'd expect that to be where this one ends. A 24-year wait, a father's old conviction, a son's DNA, an arrest. Case closed, credits roll. It isn't quite that clean. Bernal wasn't formally indicted until January 2023, 2.5 years after his arrest. And when the case finally resolved in 2024, it wasn't with a trial. Bernal pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him on the spot, 25 years to life.
As part of that plea deal, prosecutors dropped the special circumstance allegations, the charges that would have come with rape and burglary attached to the murder, the ones that carry the heaviest possible weight in a California courtroom. Mary Lindgren's family was in that courtroom too, and they were furious. Her daughter, Christina, read a statement into the record.
She said the family wanted it on the record that they objected, that they believed the special circumstances had been dropped for what she called purely political reasons to appease the current district attorney.
24 years of waiting. A DNA match nobody thought was coming. A detective who kept the file open for free. And even then, the family walked out of that courtroom believing the system had quietly let their mother's case be worth a little less than it should have been. Here's the part of this case that outlasts the courtroom entirely. Detective Sean McCarthy, who works LA County's unsolved unit today, put it plainly. Out of everything in that 21,000 case archive, Mary Lindgren's is the only homicide the department has ever solved with genetic genealogy. Not the 10th, not the 5th, the only one. How can we only have one, he said. Because there's a lot of challenges that go along with genealogy searches that the public has no idea about. You need high-quality DNA from the original scene. Blood, saliva, something with enough intact genetic material to actually build a family tree from, which most decades-old evidence simply doesn't have. You need a public genealogy database willing to be searched, and most of them changed their policies to opt out of law enforcement access after the Golden State Killer case made headlines. You need funding and legal sign-off, and a lab willing to prioritize a case that's been sitting for 20 years over the ones from last month.
Mary Lindgren's case had all of that line up, once, in 2019. For Mary, everything had to go exactly right, 24 years after the fact, for anyone to ever learn her name in connection with her killers. 4,500 other families in this county are still waiting for their case to be the next one. In 1988, a jury looked at the murder of a 25-year-old woman and said one word: not guilty. 31 years later, DNA proved the jury got it wrong, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. That case isn't even the one we're here for. It's just the warning shot.
July 16th, 1981. Montclair, California, just over the LA County line. A 20-year-old mother named Selena Keogh was found under some bushes on a residential street. She'd been bound, raped, strangled. No suspect. No arrest. The file went cold. 5 years later, June 9th, 1986. A different city, Burbank, 25 miles away. A 22-year-old woman named Mary Duggan was found in the trunk of her own car, parked in an empty lot outside a closed business. Bound, raped. She died of asphyxiation. Someone had stuffed a tissue down her throat. 2 women, 2 counties, 5 years apart. Nothing on paper connected them, except one thing detectives wouldn't be able to use for another 3 decades. Both crime scenes carried the same unidentified male DNA profile. Whoever did this to Selena Keogh in 1981 did the exact same thing to Mary Duggan in 1986. Same person. 2 different jurisdictions filing 2 different unsolved cases, never realizing they were chasing the same man. For over 30 years, that's all anyone had. A shared profile. No name to put on it. In November 2019, Los Angeles County tried something it had never tried before. Investigators uploaded the unidentified DNA into a genealogy database, the same category of technique that had just cracked the Golden State Killer case a year earlier, and started building a family tree backward, from strangers who'd never given a DNA sample, expecting it to matter to a homicide. It pointed to a man named Horace Van VAULTZ Jr., a Bakersfield resident, a former Marine. Now, they needed to be sure. Detectives didn't knock on his door and ask for a sample. They didn't need to. They watched his trash. DNA he'd already thrown away. It matched both crime scenes completely. On November 14th, 2019, Burbank police arrested VAULTZ during a traffic stop in Inglewood. He was charged with both murders. The DA's office called it plainly: the first case in Los Angeles County history built on investigative genetic genealogy.
Here's where this case stops looking like the last one, because Horace Van VAULTZ Jr. wasn't a stranger to a courtroom. He'd been there before. In 1988, standing trial for the murder of a 25-year-old woman named Jana Rowe, found strangled and dumped in a pile of trash in Ventura County in 1986. DNA testing didn't exist yet in any form a courtroom could use. The jury heard what evidence there was and acquitted him. He walked out. For 31 years, that verdict stood. Then, in 2019, the same genetic testing that caught him for Keogh and Duggan was run against the old Rowe evidence, too. It matched. Semen recovered from her body, his DNA, exactly. The jury in 1988 had been wrong. VAULTZ really had killed Jana Rowe. And because of a legal protection called double jeopardy, it no longer mattered. He could never be tried for her murder again, not with new evidence, not with anything. Prosecutors could only bring it into his new trial as what's called pattern evidence, proof of who he was, not a charge he could be convicted on. A jury got a murder wrong once. The law made sure it could never be corrected. That's not a flaw in this story. That's the story. In August 2022, VAULTZ stood trial for Keogh and Duggan. He took the stand in his own defense, a choice his own attorney's strategy depended on. He told jurors he didn't remember either woman. He didn't deny knowing Jana Rowe, though, just killing her. My semen means I may have had sex with the person, he told the jury. It doesn't mean I killed them. His attorney called him an admitted swinger, not a killer. Unfaithful, not a murderer. Two different things. The prosecution called him something else entirely. A sexually motivated serial killer, Deputy DA Beth Silverman told the jury. Someone who chose these women. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty. Both counts. First-degree murder with special circumstances for multiple murders, rape, and sodomy. In the courtroom that day sat people who'd been waiting since before some of the jurors were born. Selena Keogh's sister, Sabrina Plord, told reporters what 38 years of an open case does to a family. You think for so many years, nobody cares. Jana Rowe's mother was there too, the woman whose daughter's murder had already gone through a courtroom once and lost. Bittersweet, she called the verdict. Her son put it simpler. Oh, how I loathe that name. VAULTZ was sentenced to life without parole. Even after the verdict, one discovery refused to fit neatly into the case. One detail from the investigation never made it into any conviction, and never will. When detectives searched his Bakersfield home in 2019, they found a collection of photographs, dozens of young women and teenage girls, most never identified. 2 have since been confirmed alive. The rest remain exactly what they were the day they were found, unexplained. VAULTZ has spent the years since appealing. As recently as this year, a California appellate court rejected his latest attempt, writing that his testimony at trial was, in their words, anything but credible. 2 murders solved, a third confirmed, but forever beyond prosecution, and a box of photographs that, to this day, no one has fully explained. Sometimes a cold case breaks because of a stranger's DNA. Sometimes because of a discarded cigarette. This one broke because of something stranger than either. The name of the man who did it sat written down on paper in a case file for 14 years. Nobody could do a single thing about it. Sunday, October 13th, 1985. Claremont, California, a quiet college town east of Los Angeles. The kind of place known more for its tree-lined streets than its crime rate. Neighbors near a house on High Point Avenue called police that day to report something simple, a possible burglary. What officers found inside was not simple at all. David R. Evans II, 57 years old, beaten to death in his own home. Blunt force trauma. Divorced, living alone. By every measure, he had built a respectable life. Duke educated, a former superintendent of the Pomona Unified School District,
by then vice president of Pomona First Federal Bank. A cold case detective who worked his file decades later would describe him in 2 words: highly successful. His car was gone from the scene. It turned up abandoned in Covina 2 hours later. And that was it. That was the whole trail.
In 1985, investigators couldn't identify a suspect, couldn't even settle on a motive. A robbery, maybe? Though nothing about the scene made that certain. Evans didn't appear to know his killer. There was no argument to trace, no relationship to pull apart. Just a stranger in a house on an ordinary Sunday. The case went cold. It stayed that way for 21 years.
In 2006, the LA County Sheriff's Department pulled the file back out. Not because of a tip, but because forensic technology had quietly gotten better. Fingerprint analysis that couldn't have identified anyone in 1985 suddenly could. It pointed to a name: Hillary Marcus Duplessis. Here's where most true crime stories would cut to an arrest.
This one doesn't, because knowing a name and proving a case are 2 entirely different problems. And for the next 14 years, investigators could not close that gap. They couldn't tie Duplessis to the scene beyond that print. They couldn't even prove he'd been in California in October of 1985. A name in a file going nowhere for 14 years. Think about what that actually means. Somewhere in a records room, a detective could pull a folder and see exactly whose fingerprint was at a murder scene and still not be able to arrest him. Knowing isn't the same as proving. This case sat in that gap longer than most killers spend behind bars. The break, when it came in 2020, wasn't new DNA. It wasn't a genealogy database. It was something almost boring by comparison. Investigators finally established that Duplessis had lived in the San Gabriel Valley at the exact time of the murder. Proximity. Presence. The one fact that had been missing the entire time.
With that, he was officially named a suspect, not just in Evans's murder, but in the theft of his car, too. There was only one complication. Duplessis wasn't free to arrest. He was already in a New York State prison, serving a long sentence for a different murder entirely, one with no connection to David Evans at all. He wasn't eligible for parole on that conviction until 2033. Solving the case took Claremont Police, the LA County Sheriff's Department, New York State Police, and the New York Department of Corrections all working together. 3 law enforcement systems, 2 states, coordinating over a killing that predated most of the officers involved. On May 2nd, 2022, the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office filed first-degree murder charges. 36 years, almost to the day the case had ever had a real name attached to it. Detectives said publicly they still didn't know why. Evans and Duplessis, as far as anyone can tell, had never met before that night. No grudge, no relationship, no clear reason one man ended up dead and the other ended up, decades later, extradited to answer for it. As of the most recent public record, Duplessis remains in New York custody, still awaiting transfer to Los Angeles to formally answer for a killing that happened before some of the detectives on his own case were born. No trial date, no confession, no motive, still, all these years later.
This one doesn't end with a verdict. It ends with a name that was correct for 14 years before anyone could use it, and a case that is, as of right now, still open. 3 cases, 3 counties within the same stretch of Los Angeles. 3 different reasons the truth took decades to surface. A database no one else had ever cracked. A jury that got it right the second time only because it had gotten it wrong the first. And a fingerprint that knew the answer years before the law caught up to it.
None of them ended the way true crime stories are supposed to end. One family got an apology that felt more political than earned. One killer will never answer for the murder DNA proved he committed. One case doesn't have an ending at all, just a name and a wait that isn't over yet. That's not a flaw in how we pick these 3. That's what a real case file actually looks like once you open it all the way. Some files stay closed. Others keep calling someone back. Those are the ones we open, one exhibit at a time. This is the 9th exhibit.